Browns won't have a first-round pick. They won't have a second-round pick. They will make a couple of picks in the third round, at least are scheduled to next Friday. Andrew Berry talked about what you look for late rounds in this NFL draft.
As we get into, let's say, the middle rounds or the later rounds, we really do look for individuals or players that have, unique characteristics, whether it's a skill or a trait. My scouts will laugh. I'll tell you the story. We always talk about horses versus goose, and a goose it can walk, it can fly, it can run, but it kind of waddles when it walks. It doesn't really fly really high, and it doesn't run real fast. A horse, it can't swim, it can't fly, but it's a really great runner. And it's like, okay, if we were talking about players later, which we would take horse traits. We call them horse traits. Because it's like, okay, hey, if we're putting together a roster, we'd ideally like a player that can be above average in some way, even if it's a very narrow sense. Because then when you put together the team, the aggregate allows you to, maybe to cover the skill set you have. And maybe a perfect example with that would be in the receiver room, right? Like, Marquise Goodwin's, he's a smaller guy, but he's got, elite speed and really good tracking ability. Donovan Peoples-Jones, he's a bigger, stronger receiver. Maybe not quite as fast as some of the others, but he's got great hands and great size. And you can combine those skill sets within that position group and, give yourself enough diversity in the offense to execute a number of different concepts.
And with that, let's welcome in Tyler Johnson from the Faithful Dogs podcast as well as Network 216. Tyler, that's pretty insightful as to what you look for late in the draft if you're an NFL GM.
Yeah, Andrew Berry did a great job really describing that process. It's kind of the most info he's really given us in a long time into kind of what you look for at that late part in the draft. And that's what you want to see. Some of these guys that are in the draft where the Browns are going to be selecting, it's not that they necessarily do multiple things well. It's can they do one thing well and do it very well. Like, for instance, I know a lot of Browns fans would love to see Marvin Mims come here at pick 74. What does he do very well? He runs very fast and catch the football consistently. People compare him to Anthony Schwartz, but that's something he does really well, is that he has been playing football for a while. Analytically, he's one of the top receivers in the draft from an analytics standpoint. So that's one thing that he does really well. And there are other prospects that do something very well. Deuce Vaughn, what does he do really well? He can catch the ball out of the backfield. But he's not necessarily the biggest guy. So like Andrew Berry talks about, you want to find prospects, especially later in the draft, that can contribute for you in even a rotational way. If you can find players in the 5th, 6th, and 7th round that can stay on your roster because they're earning that spot through training camp, it shows how much talent you have on the roster, but it also, that's your goal at this point. You're not necessarily looking, if you can find a Pro Bowler, great. But most NFL GMs, if you can have a 50% success rate this late in the draft, you'll take that.
Yeah, and it also explains what they were thinking with Anthony Schwartz, who they took in the 3rd round a couple of years ago. It hasn't panned out.